Question 53 is another interpretation style question, and this time we've been given calculations already done of earnings per share, price earnings, dividend cover and dividend yield. It then tells us that share capital has remained consistent between the two periods. So the question is that we need to go and identify which one of the following statements about the investment performance of this company could not realistically be concluded from the extracts provided. So the options are that QW's investors are comfortable with the fall in dividend yield, that QW is retaining a higher proportion of its profits, possibly for future expansion, that their profitability has improved in 20X3, or that share price has remained consistent between X2 and X3. So if we go and have a look back here, then we can see that earnings per share between the 2 years has actually increased. The price earnings ratio is roughly the same. The dividend cover has again fairly substantially increased, but dividend yield has decreased. Now, in terms of what that tells us, so dividend yield is the dividends being paid out by the company. The yield has dropped, and so that would suggest that the company is distributing less of its profits. If we go and look at the dividend cover, that kind of makes sense because the dividend cover has significantly increased, which if they're voting a smaller dividend, even with the same level of profit, that would mean that they could cover that smaller dividend far more times. So in terms of the statements here then, if we think through each of these, the fact that the price earnings ratio is roughly the same means that in terms of investors' confidence, that's going to be broadly similar. The dividend cover having increased, again, just really means that they do have sufficient retained profits to cover the dividends, but given that we can see that the dividend itself is smaller, that increase is kind of a roundabout circular reference. Given that there's been no change in the share capital, the improvement in earnings per share must be because there has been an increase in profits. The price earnings ratio compares the share price with earnings per share. So if earnings per share has changed, which it has, and the price earnings ratio has remained the same, that would suggest that it's the share price which must have changed in line with earnings per share. Now you could actually go and look at this from a mathematical point of view. The price earnings ratio is calculated by taking the share price divided by earnings per share. In other words, the share price is the same as earnings per share multiplied by that price earnings ratio. So in 20X2, we could calculate our share price by taking the earnings per share of 0.38, multiplying it by the PE ratio of 13.5, and it would give us a share price of $5.13. If we did the same for 20X3, we'd take the 0.65 earnings per share multiplied by the 13.6 PE ratio to give us a share price of 8.84. That proves to us that in actual fact between these 2 years the share price has increased quite significantly. So looking at my statements, the one which is not correct is this final option here. The share price hasn't remained consistent. In actual fact, there's been a significant increase.